and the JBN seems to be falling into place, even though he keeps talking about his contract and counting down the time until it's over. From the outside, though, it still feels like he genuinely wants to remain involved with everything they're building. One thing that's hard to ignore is how Joe often downplays whatever Flip tries to do outside of the JBP. And that doesn't just affect how other people see Flip, it eventually starts affecting how Flip sees himself. The unfortunate part is that Flip clearly respects Joe's opinion, so when Joe chips away at his image, Flip is usually the one who ends up taking the hit. And that's despite Joe already knowing exactly what Flip brings to the table, both on the podcast and with the work he does independently. Flip has shown over and over that he's willing to step in whenever Joe asks. Now look at what happened with the latest main episode. Joe and Ian knew exactly what they were doing by posting that community announcement right before releasing an episode that honestly wasn't one of their strongest. Ish was missing, Mona wasn't there either, and Mona has been making plenty of appearances on other platforms lately, continuing to build her own brand. As for the whole cat incident everyone keeps asking about, I really don't think Joe is going to punish her over it. If it had involved a dog, maybe I'd see it differently, because everyone knows Joe loves dogs, but cats don't get that same reaction from a lot of people, even though they're my favorite animal. I don't see this leading to a suspension or her getting fired. They're probably just going to joke about it the next time she shows up. The bigger point is that Mona has been working non-stop regardless of what's happening on the podcast. At this stage, it's fair to ask who's really helping who. Most people assume Joe is helping her because they watch the JBP, but Mona was already making moves before she ever joined the show. And if she wasn't bringing value back to Joe, she probably wouldn't still be there. That's why I've completely changed the way I look at that relationship. She's everywhere right now, and you can't knock her hustle. But bringing it back to Flip, every time Joe has needed him, Flip has answered the call. This latest episode proved it again. Ish wasn't there the entire show, Mona was already unavailable, and once again it became, Flip, we need you. Now ask yourself this, how many times has Flip reached out to Joe for help compared to how many times Joe has called on Flip? Because whenever Joe needs him, Flip always shows up. At this point, it doesn't even feel like a negotiation anymore.
From Flip's perspective, the conversation is pretty straightforward. He's basically saying, I've consistently delivered. I've always answered the call when you needed me, and that kind of reliability has value. Whether people like putting a price tag on that or not, contracts eventually force that conversation. Everyone already knows Flip is reportedly looking for $40,000 a month, and if that number isn't met, he's made it clear he's prepared to move on. Now, I'm not saying Flip automatically makes that kind of money somewhere else by himself, but Joe is operating on a completely different financial level, bringing in millions every month. And part of what helped create those opportunities was putting together people like Flip, Mark Lamont Hill, and Mona. Because of that, it's only natural for everyone involved to start recognizing what they contribute, instead of believing all the value flows in one direction. Joe often presents it as though his platform alone is what elevated everyone else, but the relationship has benefited both sides. Let's be honest, there was a point where the podcast needed people like Ice and Ish to help bring it back to life, before the momentum was there to expand the cast even further. Without those additions, things could have gone in a very different direction. That's why it's surprising that Joe doesn't seem to acknowledge just how mutually beneficial these partnerships have been. Even with this new community rollout, one thing stood out immediately. You see Parks, Ice, Ice's girlfriend, Flip, Imani, and even Ian actively participating. Meanwhile, Joe himself isn't nearly as visible. But if the community becomes a success, it's easy to imagine him taking most of the credit for it. Eventually, the rest of the team is going to recognize exactly how much they contribute to the Joe Budden podcast, and I don't think that mindset changes until someone who's considered a core piece actually walks away. Melissa has always been a polarizing personality with both the cast and parts of the audience, so that's a different conversation. The current chemistry among most of the group is still there, although Mark seems more independent and mostly keeps to himself outside of Ish. But if someone like Ice or Flip, one of the true mainstays, decides to leave, replacing that presence won't be nearly as easy as people think. That could end up being a challenge Joe can't simply solve overnight, which is why this situation probably needs to be figured out sooner rather than.
Is how Joe seems to take issue whenever one of his co-hosts starts building something independently with another member of the cast. Tell me that's not happening, because how often have you seen QueenzFlip and Imani collaborate again after everything started? And to be clear, I don't think Joe views Imani the same way he views someone like QueenzFlip or Mark Lamont Hill. Those two seem to carry a different level of importance in his eyes. As for Mark, it feels like he's getting closer to a point where he could push things too far with Joe. The difference is, I don't think Mark is overly concerned about that anymore. If you've been paying attention to how he's been podcasting lately, it almost feels like he's making a statement about his worth. When he isn't fully engaged, leaves during interviews, or steps away in the middle of shows, people notice, and that's exactly what's been happening. At the same time, Mark may also realize he doesn't necessarily need Joe's community to maintain his own audience. The catch is that a lot of Mark's supporters already have issues with Joe, so that audience may not be one Joe is interested in bringing into his own ecosystem. That makes Mark's leverage a little more complicated than it appears. Because of that, it seems like he started dialing things back. He's not cracking as many jokes, and his overall involvement doesn't feel the same as it did when he first joined the podcast. I don't think he's planning to leave, though. To me, it looks more like a negotiating strategy, showing that if Joe wants the very best version of Mark every episode, then the compensation has to reflect that. Here's something else that caught my attention. Mark used to be everywhere inside the JBP community. So where has he been on this new website? I honestly haven't seen much of him there, and that's something worth keeping an eye on. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, maybe I'm not, but it's definitely something I've noticed. If any of you have been on the site today and you've seen Mark active, let me know in the comments, because I genuinely haven't. Overall, I didn't think Saturday's episode was terrible. The bigger issue was that it felt incomplete with so many regular voices missing, and even some of the people who were there didn't seem fully invested. Mark in particular didn't look especially engaged. These days, the moments where he shows the most energy are usually when he's joking with Joe, and even then, you can still notice the little shots they take at each other throughout the conversation. Anyway, let me know what you think below. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and as always, I appreciate all the support you've been showing both on the main channel and over on the Patreon.